Welcome to the HC Insider Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the commodities sector and the people within it. I'm your host, Paul Chapman. Today we're talking batteries and the circular economy. This is a segment that many commodity houses are already investing in, and there is the potential that all of the lithium-ion batteries in the future come from either repurposed or recycled materials. What is the current state of lithium-ion battery recycling? What are the challenges? And what are the opportunities? Our guests, William Bergh and Yates, are working on just this, creating a platform, a marketplace for recycled lithium-ion batteries to unlock this future circular economy. William is the founder and CEO, and Eden is the head of marketing. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, please do leave us a positive review, and I hope you enjoy the show. William, Eden, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
We're talking essentially the circular economy and how that relates to batteries and what that future opportunity might mean, in particular for our audience, the commodities world. Before we dig into recycling of batteries and the market for batteries, could you, perhaps Eden, you can kick us off. Can you just give us a sense of what are we talking about here? You know, what batteries, what's the market for them, where are they used, and what's the current state of and structure of that sector?
Yeah, sure. So it's probably worth having a bit of scene setting because, lithium-ion batteries have been around for quite a long time. And the original creators of that used them in electronics, and that was the common association. And now we're seeing them going from a much bigger spectrum, from electric vehicles to micromobility. By that I mean scooters, grid scale, grid balancing, stationary energy storage, and reuse. And just you get these little examples of where batteries end up. And one example is retrofitting of classic cars. We're also seeing lithium-ion batteries being used as music festivals instead of your classic diesel generator that's backstage pumping out loads of noxious fumes. And in tandem with all this, use cases of batteries is also the need to test them and diagnose them and get verified good data on that. And as we're seeing more institutional capital and these mega fundraisers and huge investments quarter on quarter, I think that's probably going to be a bigger factor in getting batteries more widely spread. Yeah, I watched the symposium for John Goodenough's 100-year birthday, and that was the great and the good of the battery world there, because he's one of the inventors. And there was one guy, Jeff Dan, who proposed batteries to be lasting for 100 years. So that's quite a thing to think about, how to build the energy infrastructure over a 100-year timeline.
Taking a bit of a step back. So has the world agreed on the lithium-ion battery? And is it a case that for the most part, these things have been made as efficient as they possibly can? And really now it's just a case of production and deployment to meet this massive demand that you allude to, whether it's storage at the utility scale, whether it's obviously electric vehicles, which is probably the main driver of this discussion. But across the world, you're just seeing the electron revolution, and the battery sits behind that. But is the chemistry set, is the technology set? And I mean, to your point, do the current batteries we have, could they last 100 years?
I would say that we've agreed on lithium ion being the carrier of energy. Then how they're being stored in the anode and cathode, that's still to be worked on. But we're seeing how the NMC cathode is really taking the bigger leap, and has been doing so for the last 10 years. New chemistries like LFP is now, just because of supply chain constraints and control of supply chains, being just massively being more adopted in the vehicle space as well. I think we're gonna continue to explore different ways to carry and store and transfer lithium ions, but definitely we're in the phase of industrializing and scaling it to global use. I was also listening to JB Straubel's presentation at Benchmark a couple of weeks back, and he did mention this fact that we've been exploring with batteries and how they can be used and how we can manufacture them, how we can elaborate on what chemistries are actually stable and have a high energy density for many years now. And they do work in electric vehicles. We do see the ranges that we need to make electric mobility widespread. And now it's all about scaling up manufacturing, building factories globally, and follow up with actually having the supply chain that can cover up the demand. That is everything back from mining and all the way up to recycling.
Yeah, and that supply chain we've touched on previous episodes is obviously constrained, both slightly in the world of geopolitics, but absolutely fundamentally in just the nature of how long it takes to go from a proposed mine through to a finished battery is some 7 years. And we've had, we all know Simon Moores and his work at Benchmark talking about this. That is a true challenge, right? And plays into this idea of it can't just be brand new batteries being created. We have to do something with existing batteries and the opportunities to recycle. There's also a regulatory backdrop, both to the growing demand, but also trying to address the environmental fallout of creating all these batteries as well. Can you perhaps, Eden, perhaps you can take that on, just talking a little bit about what's going on in the regulatory environment that plays into this narrative of a circular economy we're about to move on to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the most topical would be the Inflation Reduction Act and everything that's changing since that got published, and all the, I don't want to say fractures that it's causing in the industry, but I guess a lot of worried execs in various OEMs thinking about supply and what their supply agreements are doing. And then to go to the European side of it, the EU battery directive is being hashed out kind of as we speak, and that will, I guess, go into implementation early next year at some point. And both of those do have or will have quite tight standards on recycling and reuse of batteries and guiding the production process through that. So it's a pretty live area. And of course, we're very open to the fact that recycling and reuse of batteries cannot, wholly at the moment replace mining. It's just that the numbers don't stack up, but eventually over time, over generations, it will be possible. And you can offset the just to take one example, the massive water use that comes with lithium and producing tons of lithium, and how many liters of waters go into that.
So just to get some basics right, okay, when we talk about, so firstly, and perhaps William take this on, there is no standard shape or structure of a lithium ion battery. And also, when we talk about recycling, are we talking about recycling the components of the battery or the battery itself? Can you just help us understand, I guess, the mechanics of the structure of batteries today and what we mean by recycling them?
When we talk about a battery cell, we can see three dominant shapes. One being the cylindrical, looks like the AAA you have at home. There you can see some standardization towards two different form factors. You have pouch cells and prismatics. These cells are put usually into modules, which then are put into packs. And these packs are then put into the actual application. And so what you got to do as when you start recycling is you got to break down this system of a pack down to modules and ideally cells. And the way that the cells are packed into the module and the module into the battery pack is very important to consider when recycling. What we're seeing is that pouch cells and prismatic cells are because of just the form factor of being block shaped, makes it much easier to pack them without any adhesives or glues or smart functions that just forces them to stay in place. And that makes it easy to just nuts and bolts remove the cells and make the entire recycling process easier. When we look at cylindrical cells, however, just because of the shape of them, you need some kind of adhesive in between to carry the heat that's being generated and to just keep them in place. And Tesla is the largest user of cylindrical cells. And they've been doing since their beginning is they use adhesives that are really good at carrying energy out of the cells in front of heat. But now with the newest generation, we see that they're also going with structural adhesives to make the battery pack a part of the entire vehicle structure, which is amazing for vehicle performance, but is disastrous for recycling. Tearing apart a battery pack that is glued together with structural adhesives is very, very tricky.
Is that just excuse my skepticism here, but is that okay? So there might be some effects on vehicle performance, but is that also by design in the sense that you then get this inbuilt lifespan now of the car, and you can't just swap out your old battery pack for a new one, and you're off to the races again?
Well, how the cells are put into the pack doesn't really matter for battery swapping, so you can still remove the entire pack out of the vehicle and put a new fresh one in there. The question is really if that's needed. You can do it for charging, perhaps. Instead of you charge, you go with the Neo model and you swap the entire pack for a new one. But the cells and the performance of the battery is looking to at least be long enough for the vehicle to be almost at the end of life itself. And so there's probably no need for swapping the battery because of the degradation.
Yeah. Okay. And let's just clarify that as well. What do we mean by what do batteries degrade? What's the typical lifespan? When is it, in terms of recycling a battery, are there ways to get it back to original factory status in terms of its performance?
So batteries, they degrade as you use them and as time passes. This is most notable when you watch your phone being lasting shorter over time. And the same thing goes for batteries in vehicles. And so what happens is that you have an S-looking curve with a steep drop in the beginning of the life, and then it flattens out until it reaches somewhere around 80% of its original capacity as the full charge. Somewhere after that, it quickly drops to a state where you don't want or should use it. And this modeling of how the battery is degrading is where I would say most research should be put at the moment. It's very, very interesting to understand the state of health of the battery and in the future the remaining useful life of that battery and how it can be, how many cycles there's left, and in which application this battery should and could go into as a second life.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. Put a pin in that for 2 seconds. So yeah, you could take a high performance battery in a car. Halfway through its life, we could then put it into another use, maybe utility grade storage, and it works just fine. When we talk about recycling, just to get this clear, I don't think I'm clear on it. So you can recycle at the cell level, or the pack level, and say the module level, and say this can now go into another application. But you can also recycle at the chemistry level as well. Just recover that lithium, repurposing. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's true. I would say that recycling is a very broad word in this case. We talk about reuse, repurposing, and recycling, where reuse is using the battery again in the same type of application. You can put an old battery from an electric vehicle that is high performing into a lesser performing vehicle. You could repurpose the entire pack or the modules or the cells, and you put those batteries into a less demanding application, which could be stationary storage. And then the third one is recycling, where you actually just grind down the cells into something you call black mass, which mostly consists of anode and cathode material. And that can go into a recycling process that is partly pyrometallurgical, but also hydrometallurgical, to actually retrieve the raw materials that can go back into production of new cells.
Right. And thanks for that. So over to you, Eden. What is the state of this technology? Is it commercially viable at this point? And I guess where, do you see an increasing interest in recycling? And indeed, what are the participants in the supply chain right now? Are they investing in these facilities because they do see it becoming economically viable?
Yeah, so there is. I think I could answer for the recyclers and say that it is commercially viable and they are doing it. what hasn't been established, I guess, is which is the winner out of the various recycling processes. And we are seeing, quite a few of the old players who've been around the recycling industry for a while, competing with newer entrants, and including some of your listeners and the commodity guys and all the traders there. So it's kind of expanding from I guess the tight coterie of recyclers who've traditionally dominated the industry to a bit of a free for all, because fundamentally the most important thing for recycling today is the acquisition of supply, and without supply at scale, it's very hard to recycle and refine your processes. And one side of what we do is talk to car dismantlers and building up relationships with them, because they are one, I guess, port of entry into the recycling chain.
Can you just dig into that a little bit? Where is this? Is one technology starting to look like it's going to dominate in the recycling options? And indeed, you alluded to the traders. So I think Glencore, Mercuria, Trafigura have all invested in this circular economy of batteries. Are you seeing one technology start to dominate? And, I'd love you to expand a bit more on kind of the current state of supply. I mean, is this even, is there a regulatory environment to push recycling? Is there even, most of the electric vehicles out there aren't older than 5 years, right? So it's not like people are, assigned to abandon old cars yet.
Yeah, so out of the technologies, there's hydromet and pyromet, obviously, which is water based and fire based recycling, and then completing that trilogy is direct recycling. And the first two, I think, are seen as more viable with the industry, and those, I guess, the players in that are positioning themselves as the champions of those two ones. I think there's quite a few skeptics around direct recycling, and yeah, the commodity traders, they're getting involved as well, and some of them have been recyclers for quite a long time, not really on the EV battery side of things, but using some of the other commodities, and copper, for instance, is and taking those learnings and applying it to the rest of the supply chain and their operations. So it's a good position for them to be in, I guess, because they've got this huge amount of logistics expertise, able to transport hazardous waste, and can have upstream, midstream, and downstream perspective on the sector as it's evolving, which is incredibly valuable to have.
And are we seeing? Is there a marketplace right now? I know this is something that obviously what you guys are creating, but are auto manufacturer recyclers, junkyards, etc., are they able to sell these used batteries? Is there, what's the current state of, I guess, the valuation of a used battery?
I think it's very important to consider the business model of those who own waste batteries today. Consider the system where we're coming from and how batteries have been collected so far. So the first one is batteries so far has been collected on a voluntary basis. You bring your batteries to the shop, you put them in a bag, and they're being collected. And this collection system is being funded by the producer as with producer responsibility. So for every battery they put on the market, they also pay a little fee to these collection schemes, who are then carrying out the reverse logistics and getting the batteries back to recycling. Now, when we look at lithium-ion batteries, and especially lithium-ion batteries in larger battery systems, there's so much value in them that the waste owners rather not give them away for free on a voluntary basis. So what they see is that there's a hesitance for anyone owning the waste to give it away for free, or even actually paying to get rid of it. And then looking at the business model for those who extract the batteries from the vehicles, car dismantlers, their business model is to take in scrap vehicles, strip it for spare parts, and then they sell these spare parts. And to them, the battery is just another spare part. And if you look in the Nordics, which is a quite digitized space, they do get to sell their batteries as on other marketplaces where they sell the rest of the spare parts. But if you look globally, there is no place where batteries go. they do go everywhere and nowhere. They are going into reuse, repurposing, they're going to recycling, but there's no one marketplace or a collection system that is really designed to take care of lithium-ion batteries and especially large lithium-ion battery systems.
The HC Insider podcast is brought to you by HC Group, a retained search, intelligence and advisory firm focused solely on the global energy and commodity sector. With 6 locations across Asia, Europe and the Americas and over 50 consultants. To find out more, go to our website, hcgroup.global. There, you can also sign up for our HC Insider content for more interviews and white papers on relevant trends and talent impacts in the commodities world.
And that's where you guys come in, and we'll get to that. Okay, so at the moment it still feels like it's rather nascent, right? There's a recognition of the value in these batteries, especially given the backdrop of real constraints already and projected incredible constraints, lack of supply of lithium-ion batteries, despite obviously, I think now governmental recognition in Western Europe and in the US and legislation to support battery, gigafactories and so forth. There's just, as being constantly alluded to, the value chain back up to the mine is just incredibly constrained. What do you think is going to unlock, I guess, well, let's talk about things that are going to unlock battery recycling. We've touched on sort of the technology. It seems like you've alluded to there, Eden, that pyro and hydro are sort of the way to go. Do you think there are big advances in recycling itself, or we know the chemistry, we know the process, there's efficiency to be made, but for the most part, that's probably not what's going to accelerate recycling?
I would say that the biggest enabler of large-scale recycling is large-scale supply. And to that point, also sorted and traced supply, so that you actually know what you're putting into your recycling processes. To unlock this supply, you have to first of all know where are the waste batteries, where do they go, how can we trace them to end of life. And here we have pretty interesting projects coming from EU on the battery passport. It follows a Chinese project on tracing every single cell. It's a framework that was put into action in 2018. And when the batteries finally reach end of life, how can we make sure that the owners get the most value for their batteries, so that they don't store the batteries for years, as they are doing today, because they have a belief that the batteries are worth more than they're actually being offered by recyclers. So what we believe is one of the key solutions here to unlock the supply is to help car dismantlers and workshops and insurance companies, collectors, collection systems, is to help them find the right path for each and every battery. And it comes down very much to understanding, what is this battery? How is it structured? What's the original specifications, but also what is the end of life specifications? What is the state of health of this battery? What's the voltages? What's the key technical factors that helps repurposing companies and reusing companies to decide, is this a battery that is worth putting into a second life system? And if it's not, then it must go to recycling. But as we stand today, it's car dismantlers and others who hold waste batteries, they believe these batteries are worth much more than recyclers are offering. So they rather not give it away to recycling. So there's a big blocker for recyclers to get batteries, just because of the fact that owners don't want to pay to get rid of them.
Mm. And before we talk about, I guess, price discovery, which unlocks that, are there agreed upon protocols, testing frameworks, commonly understood and accepted, that enables people to talk a common language when they're talking about the quality of a battery?
Not really at all, I would say. So we speak with buyers and sellers of waste batteries from over 20 countries. And what we still see is that there's not one way that anyone is describing a waste battery that looks the same as describing another battery. There's not one agreed method to say that this is how we define state of health. There is not one spec sheet that is designed for end-of-life batteries that everyone agrees on. And that is also what we're working towards. So we're setting up these spec sheets at the moment, so that just to help off-takers to know what they're buying.
Yeah. Then, so the other part of this is kind of the hardware side. Eden, maybe you can comment to this. So, and I've seen there's a growing movement in the US. I've seen where there's a demand from customers that products are more easily recyclable, i.e., Apple, you can't just glue the battery into the phone and you can't get it out. And that's analogous to what Tesla are doing. Do you see a standardization in the type of battery? Everyone just agrees on prismatics, and then some kind of regulation afoot that talks about you can't glue these things in. They have to be made for a circular economy.
Yeah, so I think the commercial imperative to preserve factory secrets and trade secrets remains quite high. So to your point about gluing shut these batteries and maintaining value, that is quite a big thing that still happens. And in terms of, I guess, standardization, the bigger question would be which chemistry is going to emerge as the most commonly used one. And from that, I guess it goes into the hardware. And obviously you have all the supply issues around nickel and cobalt and lithium, which out of the various chemistries is going to be the most widely deployed. And in China, you're seeing, I guess, the leader of one sort of chemistry being deployed, which is lithium iron phosphate. Is that right, William? And then avoiding cobalt and nickel, and Tesla are kind of following that as well. But there are still cobalt being used in other battery chemistries, and cobalt clearly has a very tight supply and not good mining conditions for that supply. So the biggest question, I guess, is chemistry, and everything flows from that.
I can maybe just nuance that a little bit on how to actually fixate the batteries into the system, which I alluded to towards you cannot glue the battery into an iPhone, and that those regulations are coming. And I would say that the electric kick bike companies are doing it pretty well. Just a few years ago, the first kick bikes being put on the street on these on these large fleets that we see out there, they were actually integrated into the vehicle, making it very, very difficult to extract the battery. But already now, just 2-3 years later, all batteries are removable and even swappable. And we see the same things going with electric scooters, mopeds. It's very easy to get the battery out from the vehicle. And I would say it's going to be it's not as easy to just swap a battery from an electric vehicle, but it's really going in the right direction there to just get a battery out from the application.
Right now, do you have any sense of the scale? What percentage of batteries currently in EVs are intended to be recycled? You talk about sort of these vehicle dismantlers hoarding them in the expectation of future prices of their value currently not being realized. What scale are we at right now in terms of amount of batteries that are recycled, and then the marketplace value itself?
It's a very tricky question, Paul. We so far can only assume that's a 50. What we do in our estimations at the moment, because we just lack the insights, is how many batteries are going to reuse, repurposing, or recycling. We can draw some estimations of modeling which are going where. It's a simple fact that there's no tracking or tracing or follow up of where batteries go. And so it's a question that is very, very relevant and should be easy to answer, but we can't. And I would like to say that's also what we're doing. We're tracking all the trades that we do, and we're seeing where our batteries coming from and where they're going, and how can we make sure that they're going to places and to players that are verified, certified, properly vetted to actually be able to take care of them in a safe and environmentally friendly way. It's a tricky question to answer today, but not in the future.
Does that mean that there are lithium-ion battery packs of scale, EV battery packs, that are currently going into landfills?
I would like to hear Hans-Erik Melin's answer on this one. I wouldn't say that we see electric vehicle batteries being put on piles out in landfills. I've never seen that. I've only heard people talking about it, which I just think is a way to illustrate what the risks are. But there are massive amounts of batteries out there, and they're being both stored in drawers at homes, but also being somewhat consolidated at logistics sites in large containers or other ways of storing the batteries where they are sitting and they're not being moved just because of unknown value of the batteries.
Mm. Which is where you guys come in. So when you reached out, it really captured my imagination what you and Kling Systems are doing, which is essentially to create a marketplace and price discovery for this, what we can only assume is going to be a very large segment of the commodities markets in the future, given the way that lithium-ion batteries are going in the demand. So can you perhaps set us up as just to understand what you're attempting to do?
So we've been talking about the challenges to get batteries to recycling and reuse, and I'd say we're doing everything we can to close the loop of batteries. And we believe that the biggest challenge is entropy. The fact that batteries are being used, they're being sold in second hand, third hand, they're being exported, they're far away from their country of origin when they reach end of life, or at least far away from a collection system. They have unknown values. They have unknown end of life paths. You don't know if it can be reused. You don't know if it should be repurposed. You don't know which recycling process and recycling player is actually building up processes designed for that specific battery chemistry. So what we're doing is we're first of all mapping out the players out there, knowing what processes they're doing, who are having batteries out there, and which batteries are there. So we're doing three things. First of all, we're building a marketplace connecting the players of holding used or waste batteries and the ones that want to capture that remaining value in terms of energy or in terms of raw material. Secondly, we're building a battery database that we're calling that is set up in a chem to pack model, so that we, for every battery system out there, we're mapping which modules are in which battery pack, which cells are in which modules, and which chemistries are in which cells, so that we can understand what's the energy out there in waste batteries and what's the raw material contents out there. And the second part is what we call the online mine, that we believe in the future will support and make the supply chains more resilient by just mapping out how many tons of cobalt and nickel and manganese and aluminum and copper and all of the other critical materials out there for battery manufacturing is out there in waste batteries. And we believe that recyclers over time will support and in the very long term replace mining activities. And the third part where we're doing is actually getting the batteries from A to B. And it's everything from dismantling, it's from testing, it's to packaging the batteries in the right containers that is safe and complying to the waste shipment regulations. And then it's also shipping. So it's everything from matching supply and demand, understanding what we are matching, and then finally getting the batteries to where they should go.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, actually, Paul, hearing your previous guest, Bill Nussey, on the recent episode when he was talking about the fourth order effect of platforms coming after the first, second, and third order effects of components, integrations, and services. And, ideally, we want to be the fourth order effect of the energy infrastructure for the next generation and how that's going to change concepts of energy security and resiliency. And I think his points about local energy, if I remember correctly, was really well made, and that kind of struck at the heart of what we're trying to do: help local supply become a thing.
So I mean, I find it fascinating. So in essence, you'd be, if I'm out there wanting to build utility scale storage, I'm making this up, and I don't need to have the most perfect batteries to do that. I just need them in that sort of the flat part of the S curve you described. I could go onto your platform, I could source those batteries. The online mine would tell me the provenance of those batteries. A common agreed upon testing system would ensure that they are, what they say they are, and they've been stored correctly. And we're off to the races, right?
Exactly, that's where we're heading.
Yeah, and you said something there, William, which was fascinating. Just as we look forward from this, is it conceivable? Do you see a time when the vast majority of batteries are made from recycled chemistries or are repurposed compared to freshly made ones?
I think it's inevitable. Primary raw materials are limited, and we're going from an economy that is fossil fuel based, which is an energy carrier that is consumed when you use it, and now we're going to batteries that is the soon to be primary carrier of energy, and they are not consumed when they reach end of life, but they can be infinitely recycled if we do recycle them properly and everything like that. So we have enough raw materials to power much of our society. So there's no need to dig up new ones. And eventually it's just going to be more cost effective to get recycled materials, because the raw material density in a used battery is just much more dense than the raw materials in the ground.
Mm.
And then this is pushed for also by regulation, so it's also going to be forced. The industry is going to be forced to use recycled materials, and it's starting relatively soon if you look at the European battery regulation.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I guess when I first came to this world of lithium, right through the early episodes, will it become commoditized, and will it be traded commodity? And there have been some contracts, available on CME, etc. But actually, kind of just listening and talking to you guys at the time we've had, the likelihood is the commodity aspect, the trading aspect of batteries is going to be in this circular economy level, right? We're not going to necessarily see a vast trade for these newly mined products or metals. It's going to actually sit within the circular economy, and hence why we are seeing the traders who, the one thing they have is a better view of the future than others, given the amount of intelligence that they have gathered through operating in a global marketplace, are already seeing this and starting to invest in those key aspects of the supply chain that will control the value in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I love the question of what's a commodity, and how abstract does a thing have to be to be able to commoditize it. It's already very interesting discussions on whether lithium is a commodity, and many in the industry argue that it's not. It's a special chemistry. But as you add more information to things, and you can map out similarities and just be able to describe whatever you're trading, you can trade the raw materials in batteries if you can just map out the actual raw materials that are in those batteries. But maybe you could maybe nuance this.
Yeah, and I guess the biggest nuance that we probably have to mention is the geopolitical angle and the security of supply, and the Inflation Reduction Act is going to change things, and the EU Battery Directive is going to change things. There is the overwhelming dominance that China has on large parts of the supply chain. So there is a lot of nuances there as well, because China and the big Chinese operations have huge contracts in place with the big Western car makers, and the likes of Tesla and VW have pretty tight linkages with the likes of BYD and CATL. There's also a shade, I guess, not really a shade, but a kind of perspective that one needs to look at how the 2020s are going to play out and into the 2030s, and how China will, to some extent, maybe loosen its grip on the supply chain. Will it let the US do that when all these issues around Taiwan are happening? It's kind of hard to know.
Yeah, it sits, as always, right? The commodities and energy in general sit at the nexus of geopolitics, and there's a fascinating story there that will play out. One final question. What we haven't talked about here in terms of accelerating this circular economy, and which has come up in previous episodes, is obviously carbon and carbon avoidance and potential credits tied to that. Is anyone working on a voluntary credit tied to the recycling of batteries? And I assume that would be quite an accelerant to the sector.
I'm sure there is. I just don't know if it's in our bit of the industry.
I guess companies like Circular, who are tracking raw materials in batteries, but also in other streams are working towards how they can tie carbon emissions and carbon footprints to batteries. That's also a big part of the battery passport that's being developed at the moment, looking at how much carbon was emitted in each step of the value chain of producing that battery and how it's used. But then the next order of that into putting them to carbon credits and trading of them, and how that's going to be used as a carbon credits as a commodity almost. I haven't seen a player that is doing that purely, but I guess that must be coming soon, right?
Well, you can have that one for free.
Thank you.
Well, okay. So it's been a really interesting discussion. I feel like there's so much more. I've got so many questions and so much more to cover, but we'd love to have you guys back on in a year or so and see where you've got to on this journey, because I think it's a fascinating one, and I think it's another example of actually the commodities sector being at the forefront of energy transition and the opportunities that presents. Eden, where can people who will no doubt be interested off the back of this conversation find out about you and Kling Systems?
Yeah, just get in touch. We're always happy to take calls on either the buy or the sell side, klingsystems.com or our LinkedIn, or we're always around for a chat and to see where the industry is going and talk about any supply that we have or anything like that. I think one of the best and most interesting things about this industry is that everyone talks to each other all the time, and there isn't always a huge commercial imperative in those discussions. It's just seeing what's out there and seeing who's doing what, and who's got their eye on this angle, we're happy to engage in those conversations or something a bit harder. So
excellent. Well, William, Eden, it's been a real pleasure to have you both on. I'll put your website in the show notes so people can find it, and look forward to, I guess, future conversations and seeing where this journey takes you.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a real pleasure, and Dan Jurgen has been a huge influence on me, so I'm very honoured to be on a podcast where he's also been on. So.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the show, please give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
To find out more about HC Insider and HC Group, a search and advisory firm dedicated to the commodity markets, visit our website at www.hcgroup.global. There you can find out more about our services and our offices around the world. There you can also find more content, from interviews to insight pieces to more podcasts focused on the commodity value chains. Thanks again for listening.